gives us the precious. What's up, Transformers fans? Mondo, the Dad Bottomless Prime here, back with another Moonbase 84 transmission. I have been trying to come up with the best way to cover the Energon Universe comics by Skybound on the channel. If I did it as the issues came out, I was undecided on when to cover them because I didn't want to spoil anything for those who didn't get a chance to read them yet. So what I've decided to do is cover the comics when the trades come out. The trades cover story arcs 6 issues at a time and release a little bit after the 6th issue in the arc comes out. I figure that will give people plenty of time to be caught up, and I won't have to worry about spoiling anything. I'm currently writing the script for Transformers Volume 1, and I should have that video up soon. There are currently 4 volumes out for Transformers, and I'm working to get the rest of those up on the channel as soon as possible before Volume 5 releases, which should be sooner rather than later because this month's issue 30 came out, marking the 6th issue in the current arc. Now I know that I just made a fuss about me worrying that I'd spoil something for those that aren't quite caught up with the Transformers Skybound comics, but for today's video, I'm not worrying about those worries because I absolutely have to talk about issue 30. I would say that not only is this issue extremely controversial and has already been covered by lots of other channels, but it is also the single most controversial issue in the entirety of the Energon universe by far, meaning not only Transformers, but Void Rivals and G.I. Joe as well. So consider this your spoiler warning because I'm about to break down Transformers issue 30 from Skybound, share my thoughts on it, and share a couple of theories of mine on what comes next. But quickly before I do, could you help us out by hitting the like button, subscribing if you're new, and all the other YouTube jazz? We'd greatly appreciate it. For only a single comic book issue, there's quite a lot to unpack with issue 30. I'm going to start off not with the story, which is the source of all of the hoopla, but the art. Issue 30 is the last issue that Dan Mora will be doing the art, and I'm pretty bummed out by that. Dan Mora has become one of my favorite comic artists, and I was so excited when it was announced that he'd be doing Transformers, and I wasn't disappointed. As per usual, Dan Mora knocked it out of the park, and his style really made the bots leap off of the page. Then I learned around the time of issue 28 that he'd be only staying on for 6 issues, so as I said, this issue is the last issue we'll see his fantastic work in the Transformers comic. Hopefully Skybound has another great artist lined up, and of course we'll see in a few weeks when issue 31 comes out. Okay, so now let's get to what everyone is up in arms about, which of course is the story of issue 30. At the end of issue 29, we saw the Autobots finally have Megatron and the Decepticons totally on the ropes and retreating. This was by far Optimus Prime's and the Autobots' best chance for taking out the Decepticons on Earth for good. When the Autobots are about to do just that, Elita 1 shows up and stops them because she has a bone to pick with Prime. This brings us to issue 30, where we see Elita and Prime argue, which leads to Elita attacking Prime, and then Prime giving Elita the Matrix, making her Elita Prime. She then takes some of the Autobots back with her to Cybertron and decrees any who stay on Earth with Optimus are no longer Autobots. In a nutshell, that's what happens in issue 30, and just by that brief description, it seems pretty messed up. Now let's take a closer look. Elita 1's characterization in the Skybound Transformers comic is quite interesting. Daniel Warren Johnson, the writer of the book before Robert Kirkman took over, did a very good job of giving us an Elita 1 that has been tremendously affected by years of war with the Decepticons. All of the horrors of war have consumed her, and the Autobots being on the losing end and barely hanging on to survive have slowly turned her from a just freedom fighter to someone who is consumed by vengeance, with her goal being the total eradication of the Decepticons instead of stopping the war and bringing peace. In this way, she has strayed from Optimus's path and has followed the dark path taken by Megatron, that being someone who starts off with nothing but good intentions but finds themselves lost due to their experiences while trying to do good and ending up becoming the very tyrant they were fighting against. Essentially, she is the Anakin Skywalker of the Transformers Skybound comic, or more accurately, becoming closer and closer to being like Anakin Skywalker. So knowing what Alita's character is in the Skybound Transformers comic brings us to the first problem I have with the end of issue 29 and the beginning of issue 30. She arrives on Earth. She can clearly see that the Autobots are going to defeat the Decepticons, and if she didn't happen to notice, Prime tells her what's going on. To me, it makes zero sense, knowing what we know Alita's character in this book to be, for her to put a stop to the Autobots defeating the Decepticons so she can have an argument with Prime. What would have made sense is if Alita helped with defeating the Decepticons and then took up her beef with Prime once everything was done and over and settled. Alita's goal is now, obviously, to win the war on Cybertron and save Cybertron, but also the total destruction of the Decepticons, and by holding up the Autobots, she just lets Megatron get away. Megatron, enemy number one, taking him out obviously would be a huge blow to the Decepticons. He is the boss fight in the story, obviously. Her reasons for her actions are also very laughable from a story standpoint. She tells Prime that Earth and humans are meaningless and he should be on Cybertron. Now I can understand that she values Cybertron, her home, more than another planet, but you know what, Alita? If you didn't intervene, the Autobots would have won on Earth and Prime most likely would turn his sights back onto Cybertron to fight the Decepticons there. Her actions prevent that from happening. Again, this all makes zero sense. Then we get to the actual confrontation between Optimus and Alita in the issue. At first, Alita pleads with Optimus, bringing up and alluding to their feelings for each other, and even says she is better with him at her side. Optimus rejects her, even though he says he desires to be with her again. Optimus knows that she's fallen too far and can't be together no matter his feelings. Rejected once again, Alita then lashes out at Optimus, accusing him of caring about humans more than his own people. This is within her character in the book, and makes sense that she would have these accusations, especially considering all that she's been through. Likewise, in this book, Optimus is very Optimus, meaning yes, he does care about the humans, because Optimus cares about everyone. You know, the whole freedom is the right of all sentient beings thing. So we get to see each of their ideologies and their unwavering adherence to them. Alita's anger finally boils over, and then she pulls an RID 2001 Ultra Magnus and attacks Prime, trying to pull the Matrix out of his chest, declaring that he's no longer fit to lead the Autobots. Optimus takes the beating for a bit, refusing to fight her before he finally has enough and makes her stop. Optimus tells her that you can't take the Matrix. The Matrix chooses who leads, and then opens his chest to let the Matrix choose, and it chooses Alita. Once again, I cry foul. Maybe Kirkman's reasoning is that the Matrix would choose Alita because of her extreme devotion to Cybertron, but the Matrix contains the total wisdom of the Primes. It would see the bigger picture and would not align itself with one who has fallen so far. By the Matrix doing this, it has just potentially given us another murderous Prime. Plus, I don't get the reason why Optimus would ever have the Matrix choose between him and Alita. Traditionally, we often have Optimus doubting his leadership, but what we never really ever see is him pulling a Rodimus and just dumping the Matrix because he doesn't want the responsibility. That's out of character for Optimus, and it is definitely out of character for the Optimus that we have in this book. Here, I want to stress that I'm not frustrated with this book because Alita has been given the Matrix. I'm calling it out because of how rushed it was done, and also how nonsensical in which it was handled. But anyway, Alita is now Alita Prime, and then she takes a bunch of Optimus's troops back with her to Cybertron and decrees that all Autobots that remain on Earth are no longer Autobots. Having lost the Matrix, Optimus shrinks down to kind of like an Orion Pax form, but still goes by Optimus instead of Orion, just not the Prime tag on the end. And to top it off, when all is said and done, Optimus and Alita part ways on seemingly good terms. He tells her he can't wait for the day he can join her on Cybertron, and she says she looks forward to it. I swear, the more I think about this issue, the more frustrated I get and the more I dislike it. On my first read-through, I didn't agree with what went on, but I was more like, well, we'll see what happens in issue 31, even though this was totally messed up. But now I am definitely in the what the actual hell camp when it comes to this issue. Now, I have some theories on how issue 30 became what it is. Actually, my first theory is more like a reasoning. If you read comics, then you know that series change writers. In the case of Transformers, Robert Kirkman took over from Daniel Warren Johnson in issue 24. When a new writer comes on board, they often are more interested in telling the story that they want to tell, rather than exploring story beats the previous writer has going on. This has been a frustration for comic book readers forever. You're into a story, a new writer comes in, and the story that you wanted to see unfold doesn't turn out the way you expected, leaving you very disappointed. This is often because the new writer will quickly tie up the previous writer's narrative so they can get to telling their story. Even more frustrating, this also often leads to lingering story threads that aren't addressed, leaving big holes in the story. Now, this doesn't excuse how issue 30 was handled, but I definitely think that there's a bit of that going on with issue 30. Kirkman has his story in mind and didn't want to take the time to set it up, so he just took the interesting dynamic between Optimus and Alita that Johnson set up and blew through it. I think that Kirkman needs Alita to have the Matrix for his story, so he just gave it to her in the most unsatisfying way to us fans as possible. This leads to my actual theory on why. Kirkman is the writer on Void Rivals and has been since day one. In that book, a majority of the Transformers he uses are members of the 86 movie cast. This, of course, includes Hot Rod. That leads me to think that Kirkman wants Hot Rod to get the Matrix so we have Rodimus Prime. I can see Kirkman setting up a story where Alita is on Cybertron going full Murderous Prime, and it's Hot Rod and not Optimus who shows up to stop her and ends up as Rodimus Prime with the Matrix. To me, that sounds like a pretty cool story, and I'd love to see it. But even if that were to happen, it doesn't take away from the ball of rushed, poorly handled, and downright nonsensical issue 30. In the end, I think Robert Kirkman is a great writer, and he's proven that over his career with Walking Dead and Invincible and things like that, and he should have known better to handle things in this way. That will wrap up today's video. Hopefully what comes next in the Skybound Transformers comic is awesome and will eventually lead to issue 30 being a distasteful memory. Let me know what you think of my theory in the comments, and until next time, thanks for docking.